And welcome to Civil Discourse. I'm Jayme.
And I'm Marilyn Brown.
And today's quote is "Life begins at the end of your comfort zone" by Neil Donald Walsh. We kind of touched on this a little bit last week, and I thought it it's important, I think, to dive into it a little bit more, and I've been thinking about it a lot, is this misconception with mindfulness that it's about being calm and being peaceful and being comfortable, when in reality it's very much about learning to be comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring that up, and I think that's a spot on quote for this topic. I think that a lot of this misconception of around kind of mindfulness being this peaceful state, I think that's kind of a wishful thinking. I think a lot of times people kind of seek out mindfulness because they're stressed, because they're depressed, they're anxious, they're feeling some sort of disease, discomfort emotionally, and they're kind of looking for a way out. And I think that it's just kind of become this idea that, if you become mindful, you're going to be always at ease, feeling peaceful and calm. And it's interesting that that's become such a common misconception, because I think, like, you're right, that really being mindful is being able to accept whatever that moment is bringing, whether it's discomfort, dis-ease, frustration, and being able to find, being able to be aware and allow yourself to sit in that space rather than seeking a way out. And so I think that it's interesting that we've kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe idealized a mindful state of being into this, like, oh, it's just going to be, you're just going to feel so peaceful and so calm, and it'll be great. And I think that's kind of this idealized idea that definitely is very prevalent.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too. The other thing I hear a lot as criticism for mindfulness of people who have an idea of what it is but have never practiced is this idea of numbness. And
Mm,
it's not that you become numb in the discomfort. It's that you are embracing the discomfort that you're in fully and experiencing it fully,
mm-hmm,
as opposed
mm-hmm.
to fighting against it, which is very different than accepting it or being numb to it.
Right, right. Yeah. So you're fully accepting all aspects of that experience, which I think this idea of numbness may come from the outside looking in. You may look very numb, and it may look like you're not experiencing anything, but that's to someone who's observing. But internally, that person is experiencing a lot of sensation or whatever it is. But I think that part of I don't know if it's maybe a calmness in the response to it that kind of makes people feel like there's a calm state of being. I'm not really, sure what kind of the root of that misconception is, but I think that you're right that there's kind of this idea of being numb.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think it's it's hard to put words to it, but it is kind of a, a calmness in the fact that normally when people are discomfort, they when there is discomfort, they run from it, or there's
right.
kind of chaos or fear or these heightened emotions, and it's not that they're not there, but you're kind of sitting in them and letting them be, and observing them. And I think that's where the calmness comes from, because most people are just riding their emotions from emotion to emotion. They're not observing
Yes.
those emotions. And when you start to observe them from the outside, it does look calm, even though inside everything's kind of boiling and chaotic in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, they're boiling and chaotic, and there's a lot of curiosity and exploration going on the inside, but to the outside, it doesn't look like um, what it looks like when we're escaping our emotions, when we're kind of
Mm-hmm.
flailing from thing to thing, when we're whether it be going from different substances or going through different distractions, kind of trying to find a way to escape whatever we're feeling or trying to avoid. And so I think again, it's this. It looks very different because a lot of it is a very internal experience versus a lot of times what we're doing when we're looking for external things to soothe our emotions or find a way to escape from whatever we're feeling or experiencing.
Yeah, I think a lot of the misconceptions in general with mindfulness, whether it be discomfort or anything else, is the the way that mindfulness is kind of manifested in the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
Is it's kind of been, and not completely, but in a lot of ways it's been stripped of the spiritual and religious ties that it had and kind of put into this clinical place. Because I know for me, be going to a retreat, or I'll just be going into deep meditation or whatever, and people will get concerned that something's wrong. That don't know me well and don't know, they assume that meditation is kind of this thing people use to calm themselves, or like numb themselves to issues, or fix issues.
Fix something. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's interesting how that's kind of morphed into the
Mm-hmm.
perception.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that it in the West it is very we do experience, or we have been it's been brought into our awareness from more of a clinical perspective. I know for myself that was my first kind of experience or understanding or learning about what mindfulness was as training to be a therapist and kind of learning about techniques to help people with anxiety or what stress management, and then learning that, oh, okay, there's actually so much more to this and it goes so much deeper than that. But I think that you're right, that we've kind of in the West we've taken a lot of we've taken kind of bullet points from mindfulness and really expanded on those bullet points, but really kind of left out, I think, a lot of some of the kind of deeper, like you said, kind of deeper spirituality that I think is really more lends to actually living more of a mindful life versus dropping in and out of practicing mindful meditation kind of techniques depending on what's going on in your life or as a treatment for something.
Yeah, it's like all things. Mindfulness is just a tool, and
Mm-hmm.
we've kind of taken that tool and abandoned the tool, the guide that goes with it, and kind of created our own clinical guide in a way. And that's, I also like to talk about that with people, is that it is just a tool, and if it's used correctly, it can open you up and create positive change, but it can also be used incorrectly, like any tool can be, and cause a lot of isolation
Mm-hmm.
and issues if you don't have the the structure and the guidance under it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that that can be concerning, and I think that we're really good for kind of doing that, for breaking things down into more kind of easy to digest, um, kind of cliff notes versions of
Mm-hmm.
them. And sometimes that's effective and sometimes it's not. And I think that in this case, I think that using mindfulness as a tool and kind of um, whatever may pique someone's interest in seeking mindfulness, I think that if they're able to um, find a space where they can learn it, but also learn more about kind of the mindful lifestyle practices that go along with it, and find good teachers and helpful places to learn. I think that kind of that initially experiencing it as oh, I think this will really help me deal with my stress, to actually finding something that really becomes a part of their life and becomes really important. So I think that people can transition. So I think that though we've taken a lot out of it, with how we practice it and how we kind of teach it, I still think that it still can be a bridge for people to find that deeper level of mindfulness. And some people won't, and they may just, find something that they like and use that tool kind of here and there. But for other people, it may open them up to want to experience it and learn it at a deeper level when they're ready.
Right, and all those, I think there's a big difference between um, the kind of uh, pop culture idea of mindfulness as it's kind of been popular over the last 15 years versus the reality, and you kind of get a lot of those the negative stereotypes in there within pop culture, but when you look deeper into it, all those things are everything is accessible in America, especially in places like Los Angeles or big cities. If you want just in Los Angeles, if you want to do completely clinical mindfulness, you can go to UCLA and get certified in mindfulness from a complete clinical place. And if you want to do the opposite spectrum, there's Buddhist temples all throughout the city where you can get it from the spiritual place. And then there's a bunch of places that do kind of a combination of both.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the nice thing is that we have a lot of access, but I think the difficulty is with a lot of access, people almost find themselves overwhelmed and kind of not really narrowing their focus to finding something that's actually going to be helpful. I know this was a big struggle for me, is that there was so many different things. Like you said, there's UCLA's mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's all these different things. There's so many different books. There's temples. There's Against the Stream group. There's so many different things. And I wanted to just absorb and try to digest it all. And that's completely not mindful. It's
Right.
like the opposite of mindfulness. And so I'm like frantically trying to just learn all the things and find find it in all these different places, when I realized I had to find a way to narrow down my focus and really just kind of, rather than again trying to, and we talked about this before, rather than trying to learn it, just realizing I had to sit back and experience it. Because a lot of us, again, just want to learn and just have the information and think that if we just acquire enough information about something that we'll get it. But realizing that so much of it is the experience. And so I would say picking somewhere that fits with your interest, so again, like you said, if you're looking for the clinical, or if you're looking for more of a spiritual side practice, and I think people kind of know what they're going to be more interested in, starting somewhere and sticking to that rather than kind of, buzzing around to too many different things and overwhelming yourself.
Right. And at the core, most places are the core is the same. They're using different tools to explore it, but it's really the same principles and philosophy and kind of exploration.
Exactly.
There's a bunch of places, especially in LA, that try to take advantage of people. But I think that's just also the nature of humanity and kind of the game, if you will.
Right.
But what I liked about what you're saying is it brings it back to the comfort zone idea. And the comfort zone is personal to each person. And most breakthroughs or things that are meaningful in someone's life are the times where they are able to break out of that. And it goes to simple things like what you're talking about, is just having a habit of wanting to learn and wanting to know and to find it wherever you can, and just taking the time to say, well, maybe I just need to sit back. I'm not as comfortable with that, but just experience what it is. And then eventually those things become comfortable. And sometimes things never become comfortable and you just learn from sitting in that discomfort. But a lot of times your kind of comfort zone just expands and expands and expands.
Yeah. I like that you're talking about that comfort zone, because I think like a lot of our comfort zone is really just established by fear. And
Hmm.
so our own concept of what we can handle is what really creates that comfort zone for us. And so by challenging yourself to kind of push past that in a gradual way, so you're not completely overloading yourself as far as discomfort, but knowing your own kind of comfort zone and pushing, past that and continuing to practice that experience, you're right, it really does expand it because it expands your confidence and realizing I can be uncomfortable. That's okay. Like and because we constantly want to withdraw from discomfort. There's this fear, I'm not going to be able to handle it, I don't, and so when we realize, like, okay, maybe this, like you said, may never become comfortable. A lot of things do. We habituate to a lot of things, but some things may never become comfortable. They may always be a little bit agonizing, and yet we can still get through it. And so by even just building up that confidence and that experience of knowing that I can do this, I think really helps expand that zone.
Right. I've seen a few things on Facebook lately of motivational speakers talking about talking about the the big problem that gets in people's way of success is lack of motivation or not wanting something enough. And uh, I've seen it in enough times that every time now I'm like, I don't fully agree with. It seems like an oversimplification, and I
Yeah,
think
I'm shaking my head. Mhm.
in my experience and what I see with the people around me and that I engage with is that it rarely has anything to do with success. Rarely has anything to do with who wanted it the most, but who is willing to be uncomfortable and break out of that thing and do things that other people aren't willing to do. And I guess that can come from wanting it more than others and willing to push yourself with that as the motivation to put yourself out of your comfort zone. But there's also people who just have a bigger comfort zone and it's easier to break out of it. It's just expanded larger. But I think that for me, that's the stopping block for the idea of success in our culture.
Yeah, I like that you bring this up because it really makes me think about a lot of just cultural differences that we've talked about in the past, and thinking about comfort zone and that idea that, you just want something hard enough and you just push for it, like you'll achieve it. And if you don't, that means you didn't want it or you didn't try. But recognizing that, in this country and in so many different places, everybody has a different experience of what limits where they're allowed to even be and what kind of space they're even um, allowed to take up. And so you think about, someone who's grown up in this country as, maybe someone who's financially privileged, white male, their comfort zone more than likely is going to be a little bit more um, broader as far as approaching things or trying new things or kind of striving for achievement or success versus um, a young trans Black woman, who is in so many different places. Her experience, her ability to take up space is limited by the environment. And so just kind of thinking about that it's extremely ableist to kind of have this idea you just have to work hard enough and try hard enough and want it enough, and that's the recipe for success. It really invalidates so much of people's individual experiences and kind of the culture of the world that we're living in.
Yes, plus it tries to define success as a specific thing, where I mean, success is as individualized as comfort. My definition of success may be completely different than yours and everyone else's,
Right.
and I think that's where our culture kind of fails is that it focuses on this kind of materialistic corporatist idea of success
Success.
as opposed to exploring one's own kind of value system and what is success. Because for me, success is what makes you there's many things, but what makes you feel happy, what makes you feel of service, what makes you feel kind of like your life has purpose. Those, once you find those things, that's
Yeah.
success for
Finding a
me.
way
And
to
all
fulfill your mission, kind of.
right, and I think that's we lose that because that's often overlooked by the the corporatists. We need more, more, more.
Right.
Kind of bull running. There
Right.
was the video on Facebook that I loved of they were doing the half marathon, and the woman. Did you see this?
Mm-mm.
So there was a half marathon in, I don't remember where, but there was a woman running, and her legs start to buckle under her, and two men kind of help her to kind of keep going, and then she can't. So another man comes and like picks her up and runs her to right before the end, and she's way. I mean, you can see the finish line. She's there, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
just takes her a few meters until she's right before it and lets her down and run, and it's gotten 100 million views or something.
Yeah, I
And
did see that.
what's interesting to me is, can anyone even name who won that race? But yet 100 million people have watched this this act of, I don't even know what to call it, but this it just,
Compassion.
yeah, of just, but also kind of togetherness,
Mm-hmm.
and it just showed these people stopped, and it was more important for them to help someone make it with them than to do it themselves and be better. And it wasn't about competition. It was about coming together. And that's what we just talked about the other week, was this idea, if we can't all make it, then we can't do this. That it's not me versus you. It's this togetherness, and that's how you actually create change or create things of meaning, because everything's interconnected. As much as we want to believe in that we are individuals and that we can do anything ourselves, it's just, that's not how the world really works. Yes, as individuals we have a lot of power to affect things, but we're all interconnected, and the way we interact with others is how change is created, whether it's positive or negative.
Yeah, I did see that video actually, and I think that it shows that we're like you said, we're I think we're wired for connection. You know, we are interconnected, and we're wired that way, and we have a need for that connection. And so I think it makes so much sense why that video got so many views and so much attention, because that speaks to something, I think, inside of us. And versus kind of the things that we're um what's the word I'm looking for, that we're conditioned to pay attention to or to value, like who won, and all of those kind of more competitive things. But really, the things that we're drawn to, the things that we connect to, are those times when we when you kind of see us come together, and when we're able to unite around something that's meaningful.
Right. Yeah, and it's all it's to bring it back to the discomfort, is I often find the idea of discomfort is so personal, but it's often, when I see it getting in the way, it's often the discomfort with that connection to others in a certain way. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's certain types of interactions, or the common thing of thinking, worrying about what other people think or how other people feel without actually without knowing, or yeah, it just seems like, when I think of expanding the comfort zone, um, yes, there's a lot of individual reflection, and you have to have the awareness to realize that you're uncomfortable, and push through it. But has to a lot of it also has to do with that connection to help you move forward, because the things you're going to do that are uncomfortable a lot of times are with other people. So if you're not willing to push yourself when you're by yourself, you're probably not willing to push yourself with others. Or the other way, some people might find it more helpful to have others push them, but then they can't push themselves. So that kind of exploration, I think, is important.
Yeah, and I think it's really exploring that, and then being able to find that balance of being able to draw, strength and support, motivation from others, but also being able to kind of pull that out of yourself and utilize that and be able to bring yourself into the spaces that are going to challenge you in that way. I think that a lot of us, we want to kind of be told how to make ourselves uncomfortable, kind of be prescribed, like, okay, this is the way that this is going to work for you. But everybody's a little bit different, like you said. And so we even have to be willing to explore for ourselves what actually is uncomfortable. What does that even look like? What does that feel like? We have to be willing to put ourselves into those situations, and then kind of do that deeper work of figuring out what that means, and analyzing our own, or not, I don't know about analyzing, but just because that just sounds too judgmental, but kind of just being curious about our own experience in those situations, and what does that mean?
Yeah, like acknowledging it,
Yes.
as opposed to, and I think it's I think it's easy to hear this and think like we're talking about major changes in your life, and it really starts with little things. I think a lot of people don't realize all the subconscious things that they think about that stop them from doing things, from as little as getting out of bed, or I think of myself as an actor wanting to go to an audition, or nerves, or like not wanting to take this class because it's not something I'm great at, and worrying about being judged, and all those things. And it's just, I think, creating habits, small habits that get you used to moving out of that comfort zone. And so much, meditation's great for that. And just, I mean, it's personal, so I don't want to give like specifics of what you should do,
Right,
but
right.
it's about that awareness and that acknowledgement of just saying, "Oh, I feel weirdly uncomfortable," or or what uncomfortable manifest as I'm procrastinating,
Right,
I'm avoiding, I'm these things. That's signs that you are uncomfortable. So when you're doing those things, you can stop and just think about it for a moment and make the conscious choice to do it. Because if you are procrastinating, or if you are avoiding something, it's because you're uncomfortable. And again, like we talked about last week, it's about the reflection. Because if it's dangerous, or it's something you shouldn't be doing for whatever reason, that's different than something just stopping you because your mind is telling you that it's outside your comfort zone, when you're very capable of moving beyond that, and doing the thing that you're trying to do, that your mind's stopping you from doing.
Yeah. I had a thought and then I totally lost it. Sorry.
I saw it on your face.
I
So
was
you
like, oh, where'd it go?
And then we move on. Yeah, and then the other quote I really love is Jonathan Lethem, which is, "Discomfort is very much part of the master plan." And I think that's just a good mentality to have. And I talked about this last week, about how, me personally, I try to make sure that I push myself out of my comfort zone mentally, intellectually, and physically once a week. And again, it's not me going to these extremes. It's just doing things that make me feel uncomfortable. So I do CrossFit. and I'm not a
It'll
big
do it.
CrossFit head, but it does it. And there's a part of it where what I love about kind of doing it in a workout scenario, specifically in CrossFit, is that there's a big also emotional and mental aspect to it, because it is kind of competitive and nurturing at the same time, where people are trying to push you forward. So there's also a lot of reflection on knowing your own limits and pushing yourself healthily, without going too far, and doing it kind of step by step by step. Yeah, and I think that's, and I mean, I try to watch, I mean, I cry at everything when I watch movies or TV, but I do specifically try to find things on a regular basis that are going to push me emotionally. And when I say that, for me, I mean, I cry so easily at movies and TV, so that's not pushing me emotionally. What pushes me emotionally is trying to find deeper empathy for things that I'm not naturally empathetic towards. So a lot of that is kind of corporatist media that is about people in corporate life. That, I mean, I'm just surrounded by artists and by activists and people in need, really, so often, that those are the people I just naturally empathize the most with. So just finding movies or TV shows about people who I don't have day-to-day experiences with help me to do that. And then intellectually, it's just studying, trying to learn new things, and the more you learn, the more your mind opens up, and the bigger your awareness is, obviously.
Yeah. I love that you do that weekly. I really want to challenge myself to find a way to do that. Maybe every 2 weeks. But
I mean,
maybe
yeah,
more,
that's,
it's a
for me,
weekly.
it's the goal. It's not like
Yeah, but
it doesn't
I
always
like,
happen.
yeah, of course. But I like that idea. And I think, when you were talking about CrossFit, I think one of the things that's really nice about physical activity, and especially when it's like a class or kind of a group, like I experienced this today in yoga class. There was a point in class where I was like, I'm not getting through this. I'm gonna I'm gonna pass out. This is really tiring. But then there's something about being in that room with people that are doing what I'm doing, having a similar kind of shared experience, but also having to push myself through that discomfort and through those moments of wanting to give up, or judging myself or comparing, but then having to kind of draw strength from the rest of the class is a really cool way to, I think, experience that, where you're able to push yourself but also do it with a group. So you kind of have that, it's a very personal experience of what you have to do to kind of push yourself to do CrossFit or whatever it is, but also it's that shared, we're in it together, that I think kind of that's where you draw the strength from. I know for me, like, there's most of the yoga classes that I've taken in class, if I tried to do those sequences at home, I would probably sit down and be like, no, I'm done.
Right.
I can't do this. But in a class, I surprise myself every day, which is really cool.
Right. And it's a different kind of, I think it's an important dialogue to have with yourself, is where the complexities of that comfort zone, because there are some limits that you're just not, where you are at, you're not going to push yourself through. And that's a big reason why I did CrossFit. Was I was going to the gym, and it was impossible for me to push myself physically by myself at the gym. It just wasn't happening. And I tried to will myself to do it as much as I can, but it got to a point where I realized where I'm at, it's not going to happen. I'm just not going. I would attempt to push myself and just do exactly what you would say. I was like, I could push myself, or I could sit here. And I always chose to sit there and leave. Where with CrossFit, because it's the group energy,
Mm-hmm.
I push myself a lot more. And even within CrossFit, I see a difference. If I'm just in a regular class, I will push myself, but only to a point. And I
Mm.
noticed it when I started doing CrossFit competitions where you actually had a judge. And the judge
Yeah.
isn't just there to judge you, they're there to tell you to keep going. And you're normally surrounded by people who are all yelling at you to keep going. And you push yourself.
Ah,
Well, I'm not going to say everyone will, but I push myself much, much more
yeah.
when people are going to yelling at me to keep going. And it also, I mean, that's what I was talking about before. It took me a while to figure out, like, where's actually my physical limit, where it's not about just my comfort zone, but that I physically shouldn't push myself beyond this point. And
Yeah.
then once I found that place, and it's not as scary as it sounded, it was just once I kind of found that rhythm, it became much more beneficial because yes, I could hear the people pushing me to go forward and use that energy, but I also knew for myself that I want to get through this workout, so I need to take the extra 5 seconds to breathe so I can make it through, as opposed to just pushing yourself to exhaustion and then you have to stop.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of pushing. I think that's a big part of the conversation in mindfulness and anything you do is it's not about the it it's about making it through. It's about staying on the path, and you don't want to do things that are going to overwhelm you or be a danger is
Cause
what I
harm.
want to say. And that's yeah, emotional harm, physical harm, intellectual harm, whatever kind of harm it is. That's the big conversation and exploration that people need to have is where is that line between comfort and discomfort and harm.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And asking yeah.
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna
I
say,
was
yeah,
yeah.
going back to yoga, that's another place where I each time have to kind of evaluate and figure out, and always inevitably my mental limit is comes a lot quicker than my physical limit. My body can do more than my brain thinks it can do. And so, but then there's always a space where no, I know that I don't need to do this, and being able to kind of have that deeper level of awareness that no, this is where I need to stop, or this is where I need to allow myself to be today. And I think that one thing that I love about the yoga studio that I go to is that they really, really advocate for taking good care of yourself and recognizing what your own physical limitations are for that day, and honoring that. And I think that, I've gone to other studios where it's been kind of a more rigorous kind of attitude, and you feel kind of more pushed to maybe push yourself, or worry about feeling judged if you go into child's pose and during a sequence or something. But I think that it's so important to kind of recognize that we can have these opportunities to kind of challenge that physical limit, and each time you do it and you can evaluate for yourself what that means, that it feels like such an accomplishment to me. I always leave class feeling, um, I don't know, I guess the word I'm looking for is like wiser about myself, just a little more in touch with who I am and what I can do in a different way. And it's a really cool experience that I think you only are able to get when you push yourself in a safe way that's not going to cause harm.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about mindfulness meditation, any kind of meditation, yoga, is that in our society we tend to separate our body from our emotions and from our intellect, and we see them as kind of separate things that aren't always completely interconnected.
Hmm.
A lot of people just aren't connected with their bodies or with their emotions or with those things, and it's nice to do things like I was talking about, like specific things that this is going to push me physically, this is going to push me emotionally, this is going to push me intellectually. But the things I find most useful, and the things I stick with the most in my own journey, are things that link them all together. Where
Yeah.
for me, CrossFit is really pushes me in in all those ways at the same time. Sometimes I'm crying as I'm physically dying. Like it's just, it's all connected. So I think finding that connection to your body and our society is so vital in truly understanding yourself, because we disconnect the self from the body, and they're very much connected.
It's all connected. Yeah.
The other thing I want to say is the to kind of bring it into a clinical place. What I do, which was never a conscious thing, it was just as I was meditating and practicing Zen and mindfulness, it's just a habit. At some point I developed within my meditation, is the most important thing is to ask yourself why. And I think that's what most people don't do. They go right to the judgment of, this is uncomfortable, I'm tired, I don't want to do this, whatever it is, and they don't ask why. And the exploration and the growth only comes through asking why. It's like if you're in a yoga class and they're pushing you and you want to stop, ask yourself why. Is it that you're just not wanting to go outside of your comfort zone and you really shouldn't push yourself there? Or is something wrong and you need to stop because you're hurt or something? You have to figure something out. And it's in that why that the growth comes from.
Yeah. I think that's a really good example of kind of the experience that I have in yoga class that I really hadn't actually thought about. That in those moments when I'm feeling the discomfort and kind of evaluating, I am asking the why. I'm trying to figure out, what is this? Is it, well, I just really I'm tired of sweating and I don't want to sweat my hair out anymore today? Or is it like my leg is asleep and I feel like I'm going to fall, but realizing I hadn't really even, thought enough about what's going on in those moments to realize that, yeah, when I'm doing that, and when I'm in that mindful movement moment, a lot of it is, well, why and what's going on and what I'm feeling, and then asking that next question.
Right. Yeah, and it's where so it's also, it's funny because I'm just thinking about my own practice, and when I mean, it still happens, but when I practice at the Zen temple with the group, when I first started, what kept me sitting was I naturally am, what's the word I want to use? I don't want to say self-conscious, but I don't like, I worry, it's hard to explain. I don't worry what people think, but I don't want to be a hindrance to other people. Like something in CrossFit that I learned is I don't do partner workouts, because I feel bad if I can't do the things my partner is doing. So I will push myself way beyond my limits and pass out or throw up if I'm in a situation where I'm teamed up with someone who's much more physically fit than I am. And it's just something I know about myself. And so what kept me sitting a lot of the time was not wanting to interrupt other people that were sitting there. And that always kept me sitting. And eventually I started thinking, because when you first start meditating, I still experience it years later. You just constantly think like, well, I could get up. I'm uncomfortable. I've been sitting here. It feels like it's been 3 hours. It's probably only been 20 minutes. But like, you start to just question yourself. And it's a good question. You're just saying, what's actually keeping me here? And I started to learn that, one, that's keeping me there, but then also that was actually a benefit for that moment, because it was making me sit through a different kind of discomfort, the physical discomfort of sitting in lotus position for 40 minutes or not moving for 40 minutes or having that itch for the past 30 minutes that, whatever it is, or my leg falling asleep and having been asleep for 30 minutes. So I was able to push myself in one way because of another insecurity. And the other thing I wanted to say was, it's interesting talking to people, because it is so individual to everybody, because for me, I've always been a very reflective person. So I tend to think before I act and kind of work it out
Yeah.
to a point before I act. And I've met so many people who meditate and are movers in their meditation where they fidget when they get uncomfortable. And I'll start to want to explore that with them. And what is often the case is that they say, as soon as they think it, they do it. That there is no ability, they have developed no ability to ask themselves why or explore it before they make the choice. It's just literally they're thinking something and it's manifesting and it's happening. So they have to completely learn to slow it down. So what is often helpful for them is in the Zen that I practiced, there was awakening techniques where there was like a bamboo stick and they would hit. You would have to ask for this to happen, but if you were feeling like sleepy, they'd hit you on a muscle with a bamboo stick, and it just kind of gave you a shock to wake you up. Or the other thing, if someone fell asleep, the person leading would just randomly do a guttural scream to wake up, and you would kind of see how mindful you were if you reacted, if you were one sleeping, or if it threw you off. Because if it threw you off, you also weren't present. But there's those little triggers you can do to. I think a lot of people who have problems starting the thought think that the questioning or the exploration has to happen at a certain point. And if you were uncomfortable and you moved, you can always ask yourself why later and have that exploration after that. It doesn't have to happen before the movement happens. There's no right or wrong place for you to have that dialogue with yourself and that exploration.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that people kind of just feel like, well, I didn't do it, so move on, and kind of don't really realize that it's important to know why. Why was it such a quick response, and that there's always an opportunity to kind of explore that.
Awesome. Well, for everyone who doesn't know, I started a Facebook group called Mindfulness in Action Civil Discourse that everyone should join, because we're gonna. I would love that to be the place to have an ongoing dialogue with our viewers and the mindfulness community about their practicing and about the struggles they're having or the wins they're having. And it's also where you can do our assignments that we give you each week. What I would love this week to be is just share when you've had a moment where you were discomfortable or when you were uncomfortable and you were able to overcome it. Nice. Simple.
I like that. We should get
and it could be little. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be. They're all big things, even if they seem mundane, because those mundane things that we experience add up and create. They might be small ripples now, but they become big ripples and waves later.
Totally. Awesome. I'm excited to hear what people experience.
Yes. Okay. And you can join us on social media at CivilD TV as well.
All right. Thanks. See
you. Have a wonderful week.
Bye.